One of the most common topics to talk about in all of geometry is angles. And that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to lay the groundwork for understanding angles by talking about what an angle is and then understanding some properties of angles, including how they're measured, how to classify certain kinds of angles, that sort of stuff. So we're going to get into that right now as we study angles as our next topic in geometry. But to understand an angle, the first word we're going to learn is not angle. The first word is ray. A ray in geometry is a part of a line that starts at an endpoint and extends infinitely in one direction. Now remember, this is different from a line in that a line extends infinitely in both directions. A ray only extends infinitely in one direction. So a ray would look something like this. Here we have the ray YZ. We would write it like this. Notice that above YZ, I have a single-sided arrow, not a double-sided arrow. The double-sided arrow means that it's a line. A ray has a starting point, but the end is an infinite distance away. So that's why YZ with an arrow over it, that represents this particular ray. Let's put that away for just a second. Let me show you another ray. And actually, let me just adjust this a little bit there. This would be the ray YX. Notice that I always start naming a ray by naming the endpoint, YX. I always start naming a ray by naming the endpoint, and then I name whatever point is beyond the endpoint in the direction of the infinite end, the end that extends infinitely in one direction. So whenever you name a ray, make sure the first thing you name is the endpoint and then the other point. Okay, now, hey, what if I showed both of these rays at the same time? Now, we could say that this makes a line, this figure, with points X, Y, and Z on it, when we put the two rays together, makes a line because now it extends infinitely in both directions. But I think more appropriately, because you knew that YZ was one ray that I drew and YX was one ray, we would call these opposite rays. They're two rays that have a common endpoint, and the key is when we take all of their points together, they form a line. Okay, so we would say that YZ, ray YZ, and ray YX are opposite rays. They have a common endpoint. They're in opposite directions, but according to the definition, they form a line because they are directly opposed in direction, and they have all of the points in that direction from one end infinity to the other end infinity. All right? Next, now that we know about rays, we can start talking about angles, because angles are made up of rays. Angles are figures formed by two rays with a common endpoint. Let's just take a look at an example of an angle here. There we go. Notice that ray BC and ray BA are both rays, and they have a common endpoint, B, but they're pointing in different directions. Okay, so now I've got a figure formed by two rays with a common endpoint pointing in different directions. That's an angle. The vertex of my angle is the common endpoint. In other words, the vertex is B. And then the sides are made up of the rays, the points on the rays other than that endpoint B. So I would have side BC and side BA, but technically B is the vertex, so it wouldn't be considered to be one part of the side. All right, and then here's my angle. How do I name this angle? How do I let everybody know I'm talking about this particular angle? Well, there's three ways that you can notate an angle. I'm going to give you 4 examples, but 2 of these examples are the same way with just a different letter order. So I could call this angle ABC. Notice that the middle letter is the vertex of the angle, angle ABC. I could also call it angle CBA, because the only thing that's important when I use this 3-letter notation is that the vertex is in the middle. Also, I have to have points that are on either side of the vertex. So I have to have 1 point from one ray, 1 point from the other ray, and then the vertex in the middle. These are both valid ways of naming the angle, and probably the most the most common way of naming an angle is to name 3 points that are on the angle with the vertex in the middle and then the other 2 points on the sides. You could also name an angle by just its vertex, angle B. The problem with this one is that if angle B represents any other angle, if any other angle is connected to that vertex, like let's say that I made another angle from CBY and I drew a ray that went through from B to Y. Now, B is the vertex of more than one angle in the same figure, and I can't just name angle B anymore because it also represents another angle. So it only works to do this if there's only one angle at the vertex that you're naming. And then finally, notice I have this little number 1 in here. You could also name an angle by its number. So if in the figure there are numbers given to each angle, you can refer to that number instead of referring to any of the letters. Okay, just one other point to make about angles. We would say that any point that is encompassed between the two rays would be the interior of the angle. So I've got here drawn the interior of angle ABC. And that's the set of all points that's inside the angle. The set of all points outside the angle would be called the exterior of the angle. And you see I've got that shaded in green. So we'd say the interior of the angle is any point inside the angle between the two rays. And then outside the angle, the exterior would be in green. There's any point that's not in between the two rays. All right, and these are the basic definitions that you need to know to start studying angles. We're going to move on to the next lesson where we talk about some postulates and get a little bit more detailed.